Hello, and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is the next chapter of Magic of Moonlight. Chapter 15. Cheerleader Chaos 2. Chelsea chuckled. Her plan was working perfectly. Her helper had led Ember successfully to their trap. Now, she was completely out of the way, and Sebastian was convinced that she was Ember. The Dark Mage Trance had contracted to purchase the illusion potion, knew their stuff well. She wanted to present as a very convincing Ember, and the potion she drank did just that. She sat comfortably in Sebastian's arms while pretending to read like Ember did. She internally purred at his arm loosely positioned around her waist, and his head resting on her shoulder, as he took deep breaths of her scent. Ember's scent. Part of her felt sad that Sebastian wouldn't willingly hold her like this in her natural form, but she had a plan. She knew he wouldn't have a choice if he got her pregnant. They were both 18, and so he could get her pregnant despite her having Ember's appearance. Once she was pregnant, she could claim rights as being the she-wolf birthing the future alpha heir. Ember would have no power over her, and she would be able to drive her away. Once she did that, Sebastian would be all hers. She glanced at the other 3 future alphas. Why should Ember's friends have them? She smiled lightly. She would get her friends' potions disguised as the other 3, and put the real ones out of the way as well. Sebastian nibbled along her neck before whispering in her ear, "You stopped turning pages. Something interesting?" Chelsea shook her head. "No." "Oh?" Sebastian's voice turned into a purr in her ear. She felt like melting at the sound of it. "Something else on your mind, my love?" He nipped her ear, causing her to let off a little giggle. "Keep those noises up, and you won't make it to your next class." Chelsea thought carefully about her next words before replying. "Horn dog? What if I don't want to go to my next class for once?" She caught sight of both Violet and Rita looking at her strangely. Too much? I know Ember has called him a horn dog before, but perhaps the suggestion that I didn't want to go to class was too out of character. Sebastian pulled her into a tight squeeze before tilting her chin up to give her a kiss. "If that is what you wish, I'd happily skip with you." Chelsea gave him a small smack on the arm and then squealed when he moved so he could stand up. He picked her up, hoisting her over his shoulder. She gave him another small smack on his back, causing him to let off a playful growl. He turned to walk towards the woods near the school. "Sebastian," Caius called out to him in an exasperated tone, "put my sister down and get back here. We have class soon." Sebastian turned and gave everyone a cheeky grin before disappearing fast amongst the trees with Chelsea still over his shoulder. Caius shook his head and sighed. All my sister has to do is hint at possibly wanting to have sex and his mind goes straight there. "Let's face it," Violet sighed as she leaned back against him. "All he has to do is see Ember and he's already there. Ember called him a horn dog for a reason, you know." Caius bit his lip and looked in the direction the 2 had disappeared. Was it just me, or is Sebastian rubbing off on my sister too much? "As in she wouldn't normally suggest something like that during school?" Toby asked. Caius nodded. The others voiced agreement as well. This could be just the beginning of her being more in sync with him. He's already started by reading a lot more. Let's see what I can see. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to jump into the future. He was barely gone for 2 seconds before he cried out, his eyes snapping open. They watered from the pain that shot through his entire body. I don't know if I want to look. Logan wrapped his arms comfortingly around him. What did you see? Rita scrambled out of Raven's lap to hold Toby. Violet reached out to hold his hand in support. It was a brief flash, Toby whispered. His whole body shivered. She was crying. There was red marks of betrayal over her skin. He shivered. What pulled me away was the feeling. I could feel intense pain and sorrow coming from her. Sebastian wouldn't! Caius cried loudly, drawing the attention of other wolves nearby. He loves my sis too deeply for him to even consider betraying her. He added in a lower tone, Can you stomach a deep dive? Rita asked quietly. We need to know what happened. I can try. He glanced around at everyone before saying, Looks like all of us are skipping our next class. Sebastian purred as he pressed Chelsea against the tree. His feisty little flame had become more and more bold with each day they were together. This was the first time she had ever asked him to have sex with her during school. Let's just say this whole section is Sebastian having sex with Chelsea. Yeah. Like I said, it's in writing.com, so you can look at the written version there. So I'm going to the next scene. Toby sat in Logan's lap, biting his lip. It had been half an hour since they started trying, and they couldn't see the vision he saw earlier. He was afraid to bring up what was at the forefront of his mind. Violet and Rita, who were still sitting in their own mates' laps, were watching him with concern. Violet's heart hammered in her chest, while Rita was feeling a little faint. The knights had been guests on the deep dive and had seen multiple different flashes of different futures, but not what they were seeking. They were confused as to what it was that Toby had seen. Was it a future that had already been negated? If so, how? I don't want to say this, Toby murmured, drawing all of their attentions. If it's not in the future, then it may already be in the past. How? Caius asked quietly. He didn't like where Toby was going with this. There's only one way to find out, Rita replied. She extended her hand to Toby and Violet. The three drew the knights with them into the past. Immediately, the image of Ember that Toby saw appeared. Her pain hit them full force. She sat in a room, alone with very little light. Her clothes looked torn and dirty, like as if she had fought someone. But what stood out to all of them were the red, angry marks that crisscrossed her skin. 4 by their count. Before their eyes, another streaked across her skin, causing Ember to scream out in pain. How? Caius replied in shock. We need to see what Sebastian is doing at the point of time this is happening. Rita shifted her vision to show Sebastian. His growls and what sounded like Ember's moans filled the air. They didn't need to fully see in order to know what was going on. Logan and Toby moved their astral bodies closer. She looks like Ember. It must smell like Ember for Sebastian to be fooled, Logan said, looking at the situation with a critical eye. He put the thought of Sebastian having sex in front of him out of his mind. Her clothes are still on, Toby said suddenly. If this wolf, person, creature, whatever the hell is taking Ember's appearance, had no clothes on, he would see she has no tattoo. Nothing in the mortal world can copy or recreate divine marks. Then we need to find them before Sebastian knowingly does more damage, Raven growled. They all nodded before withdrawing from the deep dive. Violet immediately looked at the present time to see where Sebastian was. Without even pulling out of her vision, she cried, "Caius, mind link him! Mind link him!" "Sebastian!" Caius screamed through the mind link, drawing both Raven and Logan, as well as unknowingly drawing their fathers in as well. Sebastian stumbled and fell backwards at the force of the mind link. Chelsea fell into his lap and came face to face with his dick. She leaned down and took it into her mouth. I shouldn't have said that, but anyway, whatever. "What?" Sebastian growled angrily. "I'm busy." "Fuck you being busy. You realize you're hurting my sister, you asshole?" "I think she's actually enjoying..." Sebastian let out a verbal moan. He placed a hand on her shoulder and gently pushed her back. She looked at him curiously. He raised one finger at her before going back into his mind link. "She seems to be enjoying it. How am I hurting her?" "Does this look like she's enjoying it?" Caius threw at him what they had seen during their dive. "Does she, Sebastian?" Sebastian's eyes widened. He couldn't answer. If that image was true, then who was sitting before him? He focused back on Chelsea before growling angrily. His mind link opened, showing what he was doing. He grabbed her around the neck and slammed her hard against the tree. "Who the fuck are you?" he growled angrily. Despite Ember's scent in the air, Griffin wasn't calming down. Fenrir was also furious. His eyes shifted from hazel to Griffin's gold and to Fenrir's red before going back to his hazel. His claws appeared and sliced through her top, revealing no silver crescent moon. "Let me take over," Fenrir growled angrily. "This creature isn't going to get away. She'll be the example not to copy your mate." "Be my guest," Sebastian replied with an equally ferocious growl. Directing his attention to the mind link, he snarled, "Can someone come and take this thing from me after she's been interrogated? I am liable to tear her apart before we find my mate." "We're coming," the knights called through the link. They kept the link open between them, watching everything Sebastian was doing. "Sebastian, please." Chelsea struggled to breathe. She was confused by Sebastian's now red eyes. She knew Gold Eyes was his wolf. She didn't know anything about Red Eyes. "You're hurting me." "Good," Fenrir snarled. "My human already asked you a question. Who the fuck are you?" "Ember," she whispered. He began to laugh before placing a claw directly over her heart. "Please." "No. Oh no," he said, in a mock gentle tone. "You are not my Ember. You see, Ember has my brand right here." I was adamant that I was going to make Sebastian's life a living hell if he ever found his mate, but I found myself taking a liking to her as well, so I branded her. He leaned forward and smiled. No potion can copy demonic marks. So I ask you again, who the fuck are you? No lies this time. Chelsea shook. A demon. When was Sebastian possessed by a demon? Her mind scrambled, trying to find a way out of this predicament. Please. Fenrir snarled and sliced a claw through her skin. She screamed loudly in pain. Sobbing, she continued to beg. Please. You're not giving me my answer, Fenrir replied, in an almost smug tone. He could sense not only the knights, but also the alphas very close to him. No matter. Griffin should be able to pinpoint her as soon as you revert to whatever you are. Caius and Logan ran in to grab a hold of Chelsea's arms. Let's hope you continue to hold up this farce. Let's hope you continuing to hold up this farce is worth it. He raked his claws down her skin, causing her to scream in agony. Her image began to shift from Ember to her original self. She hung limply between Caius and Logan. Tears rolled down her face. Alpha Alexis took one look at Fenrir, with a raised eyebrow, before leaning down to roughly grab Chelsea's chin, so he could see her face. I'm disappointed in you. I'm sure your father will be as well. He's tilted his head at the two. Take her to the Shadowrunner's dungeon. We'll deal with her there. Sounds of her wails and sobs could be heard as she was dragged through the woods. Raven followed as well to ensure she didn't escape. The other three alphas joined Alpha Alexis and Fenrir. So, who are you? I know my son isn't possessed by a demon, but you certainly aren't Griffin. Fenrir bowed, taking a moment to calm himself. I feel very privileged that I am meeting all sorts of people during this lifetime. I am Fenrir, guardian deity to His Majesty. I am not supposed to be here yet, but the circumstances with Trance prompted His Majesty to send me to Sebastian. I can explain more in detail later, but first, we need to find Ember. The alphas had no time to respond as they watched his eyes change from red to gold. Follow me. Griffin shifted into his wolf form, not caring about his clothes, and bounded through the forest. He could hear footfalls of the alphas behind him as they raced back through the school and into deep water territory. Alpha Razel snarled angrily. Out of the four, he held the tightest reins on his pack, and yet still there were some who would defy him. Griffin paused and crouched down. The alphas also crouched down. It wasn't long before what Griffin could hear was filtered to their ears. Did you see it? One wolf laughed, almost with glee. Chelsea's doing some great work. She'll have Sebastian wrapped around her finger, and we will have a new toy to play with that no one will ever suspect is missing. Ember was always worthless. Another one replied with a smile. She'll definitely be worth something now once we train her. We'll make a fortune. He spread his fingers in the air. Imagine this. Come fuck an alpha's daughter. This bitch deep throats like you wouldn't believe. They both laughed hard. Once Chelsea finally has him completely devoted as hers, we'll give her some thorough training before we start selling her. Griffin snarled before leaping out of his hiding spot. The two wolves stared at him stunned. Turning to run, they once again froze. 4 more pitch-black wolves stepped out of the shadows. One howled loudly, forcing the two to their knees. They could feel the power in the howl. Alpha Razel. The one laughing about giving Ember a thorough training stammered. His words were drowned out by all but the first wolf howling. They watched as their friends were forced from their encampment to sit by their side. The 4 alphas stared down at them angrily. One of the alphas indicated to the first wolf to head towards the encampment. The first wolf turned and snarled at them before darting off into the direction their friends had come from. "That was Sebastian," one of the wolves from the Shadowrunners pack whispered. Chelsea failed. Ember laid curled in a ball. The marks of betrayal on her body still stung whenever she moved. Even breathing was hard. She couldn't understand why Sebastian would be with someone else. Her heart felt empty and cold. She felt broken. She felt utterly alone. Maybe I am worthless, she thought to herself. Her silent tears created a small puddle where she lay. She had heard the plans the wolves had for her. Maybe Sebastian was just breaking me in for them, starting my training. A soft voice in her ear was telling her no. Tried to tell her that this wasn't right, that Sebastian was tricked. Even my own mind is trying to pretend. He brought me here. I'm trapped here because of him. This is my reality. I bear the marks to prove it. Her eyes closed. She felt herself drift. Her body was tired from the pain. Her only relief was that there was no more marks coming. There hadn't been any more marks burning their angry way across her skin for a while now. Willingly, she shut herself down. She didn't want to be present anymore. If she was going to be a sex toy, then she would rather be an empty, mindless sex toy. She let herself drift. She made her way to a world within her mind. She knew Sebastian could reach her in her source, so what better way to be out of his and everyone else's reach but to be within her own mind? No one could touch her there. She smiled and set about creating a little sanctuary for herself. And I left you guys on another cliffhanger. I'm so cruel. But yeah. So, now we know that Chelsea has been revealed. We know that Sebastian knows he's been fooled. So we're gonna have to find out next what happens. And you could probably guess that considering I've already I'm up to writing chapter 18, that it's possibly good news, possibly bad news. Who knows? But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below as to what might be happening next. Make sure to subscribe and ring the little notification bell if you want further updates of this story, or help the fan fiction or any other stories or the gaming content or anything else that's on my channel. And as always, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.